No matter how bad things get, you always come together. Aren't you gonna say the thing?
What?
Avengers assemble.
How's it going, guys? Hope you guys had a great week. So I'm back today to finally weigh in on Marvel Avengers. I beat this game last week, finished the main story campaign, and I've been pretty much jumping into the multiplayer and post-story missions, all of the games as a service elements for the last week to generally experience everything that the game has to offer. And I'm finally here to let you know my thoughts on the game. So without further ado, let's just jump in on this and let me cover the game in some detail for you. We're going to do this all freeform. I've got notes here with my main bullet points, so hopefully I can keep this as concise as possible. So what is Marvel Avengers? Well, for those of you that may not know, Marvel Avengers is an action RPG with games as a service elements. It is developed by Crystal Dynamics and published by Square Enix, and it is based on the Marvel Avengers comics, but the game is most definitely heavily inspired by the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The events of the game begin with A-Day. This is where the public and the Avengers are celebrating the unveiling of their second headquarters in San Francisco, as well as their own helicarrier called the Chimera, which is powered by a Terrigen crystal. Suffice it to say, in the opening prologue, a terrible disaster occurs, resulting in the death of thousands, the destruction of San Francisco, or large parts of it, and the supposed death of Captain America. The disaster itself also produces a Terrigen mist which sweeps across the city and actually turns countless people into Inhumans. These are mutated people on a cellular level, which gives them superhuman abilities. The Avengers, of course, are blamed for the disaster and disband. The game then picks up 5 years later, and superheroes have been outlawed, while a science-based organization calling itself AIM, led by former Avengers scientist George Tylerton, takes their place in society, vowing to find a cure for what is dubbed the Inhuman disease. The game continues in the shoes of a teenage Kamala Khan, who has actually become an Inhuman herself. She's given polymorphic abilities, which gives her the ability to stretch her limbs, and she discovers a conspiracy surrounding AIM, and that she begins to seek out the Avengers and the Resistance in hopes of stopping AIM and their nefarious plans, and obviously their supposed cure for Inhumans. And that is pretty much the gist of the main story. The story is very much told from the perspective of Kamala Khan, who's kind of like the eyes for the player, and our mission is basically to assemble the Avengers. That is pretty much the main focus of the story, and you know, it's really fun. I actually really enjoyed it. So let me talk about the main game. What I enjoyed about it, what I thought was really good. Well, first off, I was really surprised by actually how much I enjoyed the main story campaign. It surprisingly offers quite a good lengthy story campaign. It took me about 19 hours to beat it, but that's pretty much because I did some of the side content, some of the harm rooms, which are kind of like training rooms to learn your different abilities and to get to grips with the different Avengers. So I did really take my time with the main story campaign and what the game had to offer there. I would say if we were to compare it to other similar games as a service franchises, say for example Anthem, I would definitely say that Marvel Avengers is much better with respects to its main story campaign. It does actually offer a pretty good story. It's your typical Avengers fare. There are some really great set piece moments in this game. Of course, it's from Crystal Dynamics, so they're well known for incredible set pieces, some really cool parkour moments and explosions, and just really awesome sort of jaw-dropping moments, you know, very similar to the Tomb Raider reboot that came out a couple of years ago. And of course, there are those fan service scream moments. There are some really cute interactions between some of the characters, especially Kamala when at the beginning of the game, when she's much younger. She's a young girl who's won a fan competition to write a piece of fan fiction, and she's just really cute, and it's really adorable to see her excitement and her fan service and sort of just scream moments with the Avengers. I really enjoyed those moments, and I really enjoyed some of the interactions with the different Avengers as well, from both their camaraderie kind of moments to some really tension filled moments as well, especially between Bruce Banner and Tony Stark. I also really enjoyed the dynamic between Kamala Khan and Tony Stark, and Kamala Khan and Bruce Banner as well. I thought that they had a really good banter as well. In fact, the game has a really stellar cast. It has a very strong cast of voice actors, and it does really shine through. And generally speaking, they do a really good job of owning each of their characters. Iron Man, you know, feels like Iron Man in moments. Thor especially definitely feels like Thor in moments. I liked his humor, his moments.
Odin's beard. About as intimidating as the man himself, hmm?
Oh, you're funny.
Yes, I am.
Bruce Banner feels, you know, very true to character, as does Black Widow. So they all feel very honest at their core in terms of the way that they react to events. There were some really interesting moments where we actually get to see this division among the Avengers and this tension between them that really reminded me of Civil War, and I really enjoyed those moments. I would have liked for them to have actually been a little bit more fleshed out and a little bit more developed. But yeah, I thought generally speaking the characters were generally well done and well voice acted and seemed, you know, true to character. I would say that Nolan North's Tony Stark for me on occasion felt a little bit over the top. There were definitely some Tony Stark, really funny, cute, sort of very Tony Stark moments.
Sorry.
You should have knocked.
I was trying. I was knocking fist. Jarvis, help me out here.
It appears the locking mechanisms on some of the Chimera's crew quarters have not been enabled.
There you have it. I will fix that.
Please do.
But then there were other moments where he was just cracking one-liners and jokes all the time, especially in the middle of combat.
Bam! Aim is down another hanger. Or 3.
Pace yourself, Stark.
Hey, some people don't have 1,000 years of blowing stuff up to look forward to, Rapunzel.
Oh, he missed you, Thor.
Feels like only yesterday we were all together like this.
Still bringing the dad jokes, Cap. Okay.
And it really felt more like he was channeling Deadpool than he was actually channeling Iron Man. So sometimes I think Nolan North would have been better to hold back a little bit more and just been a little bit more serious, you know what I mean? But if you're looking at the story and in terms of how the story kind of plays out, it is very clear that Kamala Khan is the main protagonist. She's the heart of the story. She's very much the glue that kind of holds the Avengers together and draws them together, and she's kind of like their moral compass throughout it. And really the Avengers kind of feel more like a supporting cast of characters to Kamala Khan's story, and you do really get a very good sort of character development from Kamala, and you really get to see her grow in confidence and come into her own. And to be fair, I actually found her character really likable and really engaging, so obviously that's a big positive. I would say I definitely would have liked to have seen more development on the Avengers. I think there was a lot of untapped potential in the story. The story could have easily been another 20 hours longer, and I would have been happy with just that, just a story campaign. And I think it would have been really awesome to see the different Avengers, particularly to see what they had been doing between the 5-year gap. I would have liked to have seen where they went, how they were dealing with the repercussions of A-Day, how they were dealing with the Avengers disbanding, seeing them gradually learning to work together and spending a bit more time learning to do that. And I think that would have been really cool to have seen. I feel like they got over their issues very quickly. Of course, you know, they had to, because there was a main villain that they had to overcome. So, you know, needs must, I suppose, and that kind of definitely pushed the story forward. But I feel like there was a lot of untapped potential there, and who knows, maybe we'll get that in future content that Crystal Dynamics have promised. What else did I really enjoy? Well, actually, I found the combat for each of the different characters really fun. Each character feels very, very distinct, and I really liked each of them generally. I don't think there were any of the main Avengers that I really detested. I really liked the leveling system and the skill trees on offer. I thought that offered a really nice depth to the gameplay and to customization, because obviously you can level up your characters to unlock particular abilities, but also there were 2 other trees where you could really tweak each of the powers to make them unique or give them certain effects and certain status buffs and that kind of thing. I particularly enjoyed Captain America's combat. He was probably my favorite. Every time I played as Cap, I just had a blast. I loved his shield and his ranged attacks, his movement, his sort of in-your-face kind of brawler moves and his somersaults, and you do feel very badass as Cap. And then, you know, the first time that you throw your shield and it ricochets off multiple enemies, and then you sort of swing around and kick the shield back out again. It's a pretty badass moment. So I really enjoyed Captain America. I actually was surprised by how much I enjoyed Kamala Khan. Really enjoyed her combat. She's got some really good moves. She's very good for your controlling large groups. So she is quite useful in a party. And her super move where she becomes enlarged is really, really awesome, and you just feel like this hulking giant that's sort of running around and pummeling everything in your path. So she had some pretty cool moves, and she has a really cool dodge move as well, where she uses her ability to bend her body to dodge incoming attacks. And the third one I probably enjoyed the most was probably Iron Man. I was surprised actually by how much I enjoyed playing as Iron Man. He's a lot more technical than the other characters, but he's really good for aerial support. He's much more of a ranged character, though you can do melee combat with him, of course. I enjoyed the ability to hover and fly around. I really enjoyed the fact that his ranged attacks have 3 different types. So you have your repulsor beams, you also have laser attacks as well, and my favorite was definitely the smart rockets, where you could lock onto enemies or multiple enemies and shoot out rockets. I really enjoyed playing as Iron Man, particularly in certain moments. There was one boss fight especially that I just really enjoyed playing as Iron Man and flying around and taking out points on the target. So yeah, I'd say that the different Avengers themselves felt very good, very unique. So that's the good parts. What did I not like again? What were some of the weaknesses of the main game? Well, sadly, unfortunately, there was quite a lot. There are a lot of issues with this game. There were a lot of elements of this game that I really didn't enjoy. For me, Marvel Avengers feels like it's wasted potential. It feels like it had the potential to be a great game, particularly when we look at the main campaign, but that the game was kind of weighed down and held back by its games as a service business strategy that's very clearly been imposed on the game, and it just feels very out of character for the Avengers, and I will get to that. So what did I have issues with? Well, unfortunately, because of the games as a service structure and because of this focus on, you know, collecting loot and loot grind and playing multiplayer with friends and playing online, and unfortunately this does have a negative effect on the general mission structures. And even when you are playing through the main campaign, except for some really awesome moments and set pieces, and there were some, a lot of the mission structures do get very samey after a while. They are very uninspired, and especially when you are playing Avengers Initiative, which is the post-campaign multiplayer, the missions there, whether you're doing an assault mission or a sabotage mission, a heroic mission, a villain mission, or a vault mission, or even, you know, the hive missions, which are where you take on, you know, floors of enemies and move further down, a lot of them do feel very samey, and that's because the mission structures, the level designs, they're just really uninspired. This isn't an open world game at all, but there are definitely some parts of it that they're trying to make the game open world by putting in things like loot chests and things that you can spot and discover in the world, you know, rescuing certain allies or completing puzzles to get access to chests or focusing on particular targets. targets who might drop rare loot. These are all games as a service elements that are enforced on it, but it does feel very, very samey. You know, the basic premise is you run from point A to point B. You might be asked to stand in a circle while Jarvis hacks a particular console a la Destiny. You then take out waves of enemies. You then have to run from point B to C. You might be asked to destroy certain 3 key points maybe to sabotage the enemy. You then take out wave of enemies. You then have to go from point, you know, C to D. You might go down in an elevator. You'll inevitably go indoors into some kind of aim facility, which all look the same. They all look very, very samey in terms of the level design, really uninspired. And again, it'll focus on taking out targets and again taking out waves of enemies, and rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. And that is generally the mission structure. And after a while, it does get very boring, it does get very repetitive, and it does get very samey. And it is lazy. It is lazy game development, unfortunately. Then let's talk about the loot, because this is a loot game. One of the major purposes of combat, of fighting, of exploration is to gain loot. The idea being that you discover varied degrees of loot, whether it's common or rare or legendary or the elusive epic that you get once you get to the latter stages of the end game. The idea is that you get more loot. This loot, as you equip it, will increase your power level, making you more powerful and therefore able to take on bigger challenges. But unfortunately, the loot in the game is just really, really lackluster. None of the loot feels very different or very unique. You will pick up multiple elements of loot, and effectively all you really need to do is auto equip your highest level and then dismantle everything else, because it's all garbage, because your major focus is just to boost that power level. That is what you're ultimately doing to get to power level 150, which is then where you really get to the end game stuff. And then maybe then you do look at some of the abilities that you can unlock with this loot. But the loot is just really boring, and it's not good at all. It's actually probably one of the worst loot systems in any games as a service game I've seen yet. The loot in this game is really, really poor. The loot in Destiny trounces this. Even the loot in Anthem was better than the loot in Marvel Avengers, and that's saying something, because the loot in Anthem was pretty poor in itself. And one of the reasons that this loot just seems pointless is when you do increase your power level so you can take on more challenging missions, the actual enemies themselves actually level up with you, so they match your power level. So it just never feels like you're getting super powered or more powerful. You just don't feel that effect, because the enemies are always going to be the same level as you in terms of your power level. I was really hoping that, you know, you get this really cool loot and then you go back to, say, a power level 2 mission and just wipe the floor with everyone, and then before you would feel super powered like a superhero. And then just the whole idea of collecting loot and going around and looting loot boxes and different things, it's just really out of character. It just doesn't feel like something that should be present in an Avengers game. At the end of the day, you're superheroes, so you already have intrinsic abilities. So the idea that you need to go and collect loot to make yourself more important, like that's going to matter, that makes no sense to me whatsoever. I feel like more of the attention could have been put into, you know, really good leveling system with unlockable skins to make your Avenger look different and look unique. I think that would have been much, much better. Let's talk a little bit about some of the other games as a service elements in there as well, which I didn't really find very interesting. There is a large degree of grind. There are factions that you can actually join. Well, you have to join in the game, and that is obviously Shield and Pimtech. Basically, as you go to each of these factions, they will give you certain missions and objectives and challenges, and also villain missions that you can accept. These literally are ripped straight from Destiny. I don't know how Crystal Dynamics did not get sued for this. It is very clear that they have taken that kind of, you know, faction mechanic in Destiny and they've literally copied it. Even some of the icons look really, really similar. It's so blatant. They're not even trying to hide the fact that they've just very heavily borrowed from that. Once you obviously unlock these challenges, that will increase your rank for each of these factions, and then as you increase and raise your rank with your faction, you will then get access to a vendor for each of those factions, and they will give you access to particular loot that you can spend resources and points to purchase. And obviously the higher your faction rank, the more exotic the loot that you can actually purchase. So it's very, very similar to Destiny, but at least in Destiny the loot was interesting. So, you know, sometimes you didn't mind doing these challenges and these missions because you were going for this particular gun or particular piece of armor that just looked really awesome and would look amazing on your hunter or your warlock, and you just really don't have that in Marvel Avengers. So these factions, just because the loot is so poor, the factions don't work as a result of that. We then also have other games as a service elements in here. So obviously we have the challenge card. This is pretty much the game's version of a battle pass. The challenge card is basically where you can complete certain objectives to unlock skins or emotes or certain legendary takedowns, different things. And in order for you to unlock these, you have to get points, and in order for you to get those points, there are both weekly and daily challenges that you have to complete in order to gain those points to unlock parts of your challenge card. But what's really frustrating with these challenge cards is that they're very much throttled. There is only so many points that you can get in a day or in a week, and as a result, you know, you can't really grind and play the game, say, for a whole day and, you know, get really far. You can only get so far in that challenge card before the game stops you. And the idea is that they want you to play every day, so they're making it incredibly grindy. They're throttling that so that you have to log on and play the game every single day like it's a frigging job, which is an element of games as a service that I really don't like. For me, games as a service should be called games as a job, because that is literally how it feels sometimes. Obviously they've throttled this as well because they know that players want access to these exotic and legendary skins, and obviously, you know, if you don't want to spend points and complete these challenges and wait for the ability to do it, of course you can purchase these skins, you can purchase these emotes and these legendary takedowns in the marketplace, and you can use real world money to be able to do that. I looked at the marketplace and it's disgusting in my opinion. Basically you purchase credits with real money, so you can purchase 500 credits for about $3.99, 2,000 credits for about £16. And to give you an idea, a legendary skin or emote ranges in price from about 1,400 credits to about 1,000 credits. So in terms of real world money, that equates to about £8 to £12 per item that you buy. So to buy a legendary skin, one legendary skin could cost you £12. Like, that is just freaking ridiculous. That is ridiculously priced, and the sad thing is people will spend it. That is what makes me sad, and that's unfortunately why, you know, developers and publishers are still coming out with this trash, because people buy it, people spend their money, and they're making millions on games like this, and they just lock content behind either a really, really grindy, really difficult system, so it's really hard to unlock it yourself in game, or, you know, they give you the option to buy it yourself if you really, really want it. So yeah, I really didn't like it. I just found it incredibly kind of predatory and just really overpriced and ridiculously greedy. So let's talk about some of the other issues that I had with the game as well. Let's talk about the combat and the enemy design, level design, and the enemy AI. So like I said, the combat had a lot of potential, most definitely. I really enjoyed each of the Avengers and the way that they're handled, and there's some really cool moves that you can string together. There are some really cool moments where you're juggling enemies and stringing them and kicking them up into the air and juggling them in the air and do some really awesome moves and takedowns, and you feel awesome, you feel badass in these moments. But unfortunately these moments are far, you know, in between, because for the most part the combat is just frenetic, it's just so chaotic, and that's because of, one, the enemy design, the level design, but also the enemy AI. The enemy AI is so frigging aggressive. They all like pounce on you at the same time. You kind of get overwhelmed very, very easy. There are ranged enemies as well as melee enemies that will attack you all the time. So becoming stun locked is a very, very real problem in the game. Some of the enemies, the weaker enemies, are more easier to handle because, you know, they are weaker, so you can juggle them and deal with large groups of them. But there are some enemies that are, for all intents and purposes, tanks. They are bullet sponges. You don't have the ability to juggle them or to rip parts off or cause lots of damage, and you just feel like you're punching away at them while also being hit by other enemies around you. And then there are some enemies that will do certain moves that will lock you in place and freeze you in place and stagger you, and you have to repeatedly press the square button to get out of that. So the combat, unfortunately, the way in which it was designed, it's so frantic. The camera isn't great too. It's very difficult to see what's going on, so it does make it very, very disorientating. There's too much going on the screen a lot of the time, so it's just really hard to make sense of what's going on. And unfortunately, it does really ruin the combat on some parts, and there were some of the missions that I got really frustrated. I found Hulk really difficult to use. He's quite clumsy in the way that he handles. If you're indoors, you're constantly clipping on things. It's really difficult to jump up high to certain areas. His moves are obviously quite slow. He gets staggered quite easily, and he doesn't feel like he does as much damage as you would expect for Hulk. And I think that's one of the big problems for a lot of them is that the combat doesn't feel weighty. And one of the biggest issues and reasons for that is unfortunately to do with the sound system, the sound scheme. The sound effects and the impact sounds in combat is really a big problem for the game. You know, Thor's hammer does not feel like Thor's hammer. It doesn't feel weighty. It doesn't feel, you don't feel that response on the sticks. The sound doesn't feel, you know, feel good either. And it just feels very, very light and very inconsequential. And so, yeah, the combat doesn't feel awesome as a result of it. So that's a big problem, most definitely. And yeah, the level designs, they don't look amazing. They're not amazing, are the levels, to be fair. There are some interesting areas for sure. You know, the main campaign has definitely more interesting moments, but generally speaking, most of the levels are pretty samey, particularly when you're getting to the end game stuff and you're revisiting areas. And you very much do see the cookie cutter style of the game development in this, where they do feel very, very similar. And it does get very boring after a while. Let's talk a little bit about the matchmaking, because obviously this is a multiplayer game. So the idea is that, you know, you're supposed to play it online with friends or with random people. The multiplayer matchmaking in this game is friggin' broken. It took me ages to actually find people to play with, let alone get a full team of 4. I don't think I think I once got a full team of 4 people playing, and that's having played the game for like 40 plus hours, which is just ridiculous. I was lucky if I could get 1 or 2 additional real human character players. So for the rest of the time I had to play with companion AI. So that's a big problem in terms of the matchmaking. You could be sat in lobbies for 10 minutes before anybody jumped in, and that's really difficult. The only way that you might have a better chance of actually matchmaking with someone is if you agree to do any random match and play any random Avenger. Well, that's no good if you want to level a particular character, or you have a particular mission objectives or a mission thread that you're wanting to complete, you know. So that's really irritating. Let's talk a little bit about the friendly AI companions as well, because you're going to spend most of the game playing with them. For the most part, there were elements where the friendly AI was good. You know, there were definitely parts of the combat where they were, you know, attacking enemies, they were supporting you. There were moments where they would res you in it, but unfortunately sometimes the friendly AI is a little bit hit and miss. There were definitely moments where I went down and, you know, my AI companions didn't do what they were supposed to do. They didn't res me, which would cause us to fail the mission. And there were definitely some mission objectives, things like capture the flag and hacking certain terminals and standing in certain areas where the friendly AI just was not coded to support you. So while they were aiming at the nearest enemy, I'd be running around like a headless chicken trying to dodge enemy robots and things while trying to complete these mission objectives. So that was kind of annoying. I felt like a one-woman army definitely at some points, and I got a little bit frustrated with that. And then finally, let's talk about the bugs, the glitches and the performance issues, of which there are numerous. There are massive problems in terms of the sound. There were so many times where I had sound glitches, where sound would just get stuck in an infinite loop and you'd have these sound effects playing over you in the middle of combat. There were cutscenes where characters would sort of stutter in and then the lip sync would be completely off. There were parts where there was no audio commentary, but clearly something was being said because one of the characters was reacting to it. So the right sort of sound lines were not clipping in, which was really bad. There were numerous bugs and glitches, floating chairs, enemies that would get stuck in the ground, which made it impossible for you to complete objectives. And then the final biggest issue that the game had was frame rate. Oh my god, the frame rate in this game was so terrible. Just to give you guys a reference, I was playing on PlayStation 4 and the frame rate was just, in times, at moments, unplayable. It could have been something really great, and that's what really breaks my heart about this game. So yeah, in terms of strengths, enjoyable main story campaign, strong cast and convincing performances, very distinctive character roster, interesting engaging leveling system that had a lot of potential, but it does have a lot of weaknesses. You know, all of its games as a service elements are just crap. They're uninspired, terrible loot and grind systems. The combat's just too frenetic, boring enemy design. They're very samey. They're not really interesting, and again, boring level design as well. Broken matchmaking, which is unforgivable in a multiplayer game. Terrible AI companion, which is doubly unforgivable considering the matchmaking is really bad. Greedy microtransactions, which I'm not surprised about, and then obviously the bugs and performance issues for the game, which again, it is just unforgivable. In my opinion, this game was not ready to come out this month. It needed longer to bake, and it definitely shows it. So yeah, Marvel Avengers, 6 out of 10. An average game at best. There were elements of it I did enjoy, but I would definitely say if you're on the fence about it, wait, hold off on this game, wait for it to come down in price, wait for them to introduce all the patches that are inevitably to come, wait for them to add more content and improve the game, because obviously, as we all know with these games as a service, generally speaking, except for Anthem, generally speaking, they do get better over time. So I would say give this game 12 months before you actually jump in and check it out and look at it. So there you go, guys. That is my opinion on Marvel Avengers. Really detailed review, because obviously I had a lot to talk about. If I was praising this game, this review would have been a lot shorter, no doubt, but there were a lot of issues I needed to mention. So if you stuck with me to the end of this video, well done. Thank you so much for sticking with me. Thank you again for supporting the channel, really appreciate it. If you have played Marvel Avengers, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Let me know your thoughts on the review. Of course, hope you guys are having a great week. Take care, and as always, happy gaming. Bye, guys.